It's over. For what it's worth, I'm even still alive, although I can't imagine how I'm going to keep going after what I've learned. I know what those creatures were now. I know what Count Dracula really was. And I can never unknow it. Now, it was 4 days ago that I finally set out to kill Dracula. At the risk of understatement, life has been busy since then, so it was only now that I finally found time to give you this final update. No, I'm sorry, that's a lie. I could have found time to write this if I'd really wanted to, but I was avoiding it. I wasn't sure what to tell you. Not so much in regard to my actual life or death encounter with Dracula, but in regard to the terrible truth I learned immediately afterward. Should I share it? Should I withhold it, no matter how much you, my listeners, might beg? Should I make up some comforting lie, tell you that Vladimir Dracula is some variant on a werewolf or a Wendigo? That way you could nod your head, sort it into a neat little category, and then forget about it entirely. Just another monster in this dark and strange world of ours. Dangerous, yes, but not threatening, because it has nothing to do with your own life. You're a fool, just like I used to be. Now, night was fast approaching as I prepared for my final confrontation with Dracula, locking and loading my shotgun and revolver, silver rounds, of course. I made one last phone call to one of my contacts in the paranormal business, and I was ready at last. As I stepped through my front door, the sun was already halfway beneath the horizon, and storm clouds were sweeping in to take its place. I strolled down the street, concealing as best I could the fear bubbling inside me in case any of those monsters were peeking at me through their windows. Yes, I was terrified. Like I've said before, I'm no fighter. I've spent the past decade avoiding violence whenever possible, but the plan I'd hatched relied on me being at the very center of a whirlwind of violence. My own survival seemed so unlikely as to be barely worth considering. My only real ambition was that I'd manage to destroy Dracula himself before his minions could cut me down. And now it was entirely possible that I'd end up transformed into one of those things before midnight, but as long as the mastermind was dead, I hoped that other paranormal experts could combat what remained of his forces. I was willing to abandon my very humanity to give them that opportunity. Abandon my humanity? That sanctimonious thought only makes me laugh now, although my laughter sounds hollow to my own ears. As the sun finally disappeared, they began to emerge from the houses around me, fangs gleaming, eyes glowing a sinister red in the dark. They peered at me from their open doorways. Some licked their fangs, others descended into fits of giggles and watched me with ravenous eyes. "Where are you going?" one of them mocked. "Wanted to go for a little stroll, did you?" Mister, called a child who appeared no older than 7. "Come over here and I'll show you something very interesting." When he grinned, I saw that his fangs were coated with fresh gore. I said nothing to either of them. My heart pounded with the pressure, but I managed to keep from breaking into a run. So far, my plan was working. My complete abandonment of safety had so amused my bloodthirsty neighbors that, rather than killing me outright, they were content for the moment to follow behind me at a relaxed pace and throw abuses at me. But I knew if I broke into a run, their predatory instinct would take over and they'd be on me in seconds. I passed house after house, fanged monstrosities creeping out of most of them and following behind me. They kept a relatively good distance at first, about 20 feet, but I couldn't help but notice that they were slowly closing that gap. There were hundreds of grinning faces just behind me, delighting in the fear that I could no longer hide. Any one of them would have been able to kill me with only a trivial effort. Fortunately, when I started up the drive to Dracula's castle, my pursuers retreated a little. They still followed, hurling abuses at me, but I no longer felt in danger of one of them sinking their teeth into the back of my neck. No, now that it was clear I was heading straight into the waiting arms of their master, Dracula, their deference outweighed their blood hunger. I passed amidst the trees, down the dirt drive, and finally emerged in front of the sinister castle, just as the first drops of rain pattered down on my cheeks. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I approached a huge pair of wooden doors, decorated with ornate iron patterns resembling leafy trees. To my relief, the monsters behind me stopped their pursuit entirely, merely watching my advance from a respectful distance. As I mounted the first step, the 2 doors cracked open in perfect unison, swinging into a musty entrance hall. A maidservant stood beside each door, grinning in perfect symmetry with teeth like interlocking daggers. They were dolled up in lacy black dresses and petticoats that made them look like life-size porcelain dolls.
"Welcome,"
the maid spoke in unison.
"Lord Dracula was not expecting your company tonight, but he would be all too glad to entertain you if you are only willing to wait."
I grunted in affirmation, but I refused to speak a word. I stepped inside and they closed the door behind me with an echoey clunk. I snuck glances at them, disgusted. Who had these women been before Count Dracula had sunk his fangs into them? Did they once have dreams of their own? Did they once have families? Did they once consider themselves to have a higher purpose in life than preying on the weak, or expressing slavish devotion to the very monster who had taken everything from them?
"If you will follow us, esteemed guest."
They led me through that cavernous entrance hall, underneath a dusty chandelier, and past 2 ornamented staircases as perfectly symmetrical as the maids themselves. Other than a few candles ensconced here and there in the walls, there was no light to speak of. Could the inhabitants really see in this gloom? We proceeded down a hallway lined with moth-eaten tapestries and carpeted with molded rugs that must have been once quite impressive. The hall terminated in a wooden door nearly as grand as the front door, and here my guide stepped aside to offer me entrance. It was as I moved past them that they made their move. They were upon me in an instant, restraining me before I could think to fight back. For a split second, I thought I made a terrible miscalculation and was about to die. But fortunately, they weren't interested in harming me. While one pinned my arms to my sides, the other patted me down and removed a number of items. She retrieved strings of garlic, silver medallions, and crucifixes, and with each item she hissed and tossed it into the floor, as though she couldn't bear to be in contact with it. She removed my revolver and shotgun, of course, along with all my silver ammunition. When she had finished her full-body check, she threw a blanket over the confiscated items, wrapped them up, and hurried away with the bundle in her arms. All they left me with were my cell phone and wallet. The remaining maid released me.
"Our most sincere apologies for the roughness of your treatment, esteemed guest."
I stepped past her and into a once magnificent banquet hall, diminished by extreme age. At one end of a long dining table, covered in a crimson cloth, I saw something awful. A pale woman lying in a pool of her own blood, face down on the table. There were countless bite wounds on her mangled neck. She wasn't dead, but she was very close. Her eyes were dull, staring at nothing.
"Please excuse the untidiness," said the maid, picking the woman up off the table. "Again, we were not expecting a visitor tonight."
She carried the dying woman carelessly in one hand as though it took no effort at all, and tossed her, equally carelessly, into the hallway. While the maid's back was turned, I spat something into my hand. The slender silver needle I'd been hiding in my mouth since I first stepped out of my house. It wasn't very long, but it was damn sharp, as my bleeding gums could attest. I slipped the weapon into my pocket an instant before the maid turned back around.
"If it would please you to take a seat."
At her prompting, I seated myself in the chair where the woman had been. The smell of her blood hung strong around me, almost unbearably so. The maid stationed herself just behind my right shoulder, close enough that there was no doubt that she could have killed me at any moment if she wished. But she didn't, of course. Count Dracula was putting on a little show for me, so what would be the point of killing me now, before he had even made his dramatic entrance? So far, it seemed I had judged Dracula's personality correctly. For a while, nothing much happened. I drummed my fingers on the table and watched candles dance in a candelabra in front of me. Rain pounded hard on the roof high above, and the dark room was intermittently illuminated by mighty flashes of lightning. Thunder crashed as though the sky itself were breaking into pieces under the strain of some unnameable cosmological curse. And then I heard it, the wail of a pipe organ, the immense power of the instrument easily audible amidst the thunderstorm. It was Bach's Toccata and Fugue, played with great skill. The music was not far off, perhaps the next room over. I rose from my chair and set off after it.
"Honored guest, if you would remain in your seat."
Despite what the maid said, she made no move to stop me. In fact, she smiled slightly, and I figured that goading me into following the music was yet another part of the Count's melodramatic plan. Well, whatever. I didn't give a damn how hard the monster tried to impress me, just as long as my own plan was coming along. I pushed open another mighty door and found myself in a dusty stone chapel. There were no candles in this room at all, but there were dozens of stained glass windows lining both sides, and the sky had entered into convulsions of such breathtaking violence and brilliance that I could easily see, albeit with frequent interruptions of pure darkness. The chapel had been constructed originally as a place of Christian worship, but all symbols of that faith had been destroyed.
Biblical images inscribed in the colored glass had been painted over in black paint in places, and just behind the altar, a stone representation of Jesus only barely hung on what had once been a cross, but which had been reduced to a single plank rising straight upward. But of everything in the room, it was, of course, the organ that most commanded my attention. Blasts from those unearthly pipes washed over me, seeming almost to meld with the drumbeat of thunder, like a symphony from hell. There was no mistaking the figure playing the organ. Count Vladimir Dracula pounded on the keys and pressed down on the pedals, lost, it seemed, in the ecstasy of Bach's masterpiece. The raised collar of his cape practically danced as he moved. He reached the end of the introduction to that piece, a natural stopping place, and paused. He turned and grinned.
"Good evening," he said. "You have caught me indulging in a vice, I fear. I do not think very highly of most recent composers, but I will make an exception for the genius Bach." He rose from his seat and made his way down the aisle to meet me. "Now, will you kindly enlighten me as to your purpose here?" When we reached each other, we stopped, about 3/4 of the way down the aisle. His hungry eyes glowed red in the darkness between the lightning flashes. "To surrender yourself so entirely into my grasp. It is, how do you say, very peculiar for one of your kind. Most are too frightened to dare, although in truth it amounts to no more than acceptance of the inevitable."
"Maybe I'm just a peculiar sort of person," I suggested. My attempt at banter sounded ridiculous to my own ears. Dracula's smile grew.
"You know what I think, mortal?"
"No?"
"I think you mean to kill me. I do not know what your scheme might be, but you must have spent many a sleepless night in developing it."
"Oh, you think so?" I said back, my mouth dry. "Then why are you greeting me like this?"
"Because you are my guest," he said, scandalized by the question. "It would not do for word to get about that Count Dracula does not show his visitors proper hospitality."
There was no sense panicking. Of course he'd be on his guard. The key to the plan was in distracting him long enough to strike a lethal blow in spite of his guard being raised. On that subject, I glanced out the nearest stained glass window. Even through the colored designs, I could make out the forms of the townspeople standing at the very edge of the property. Dracula saw where I was looking and he chuckled.
"As you can see, my servants have surrounded the castle entirely. After all, I wouldn't want you to lose your nerve and seek escape."
He took a step closer, and then another. His breath smelled of salty iron.
"Now, whatever it was that you thought you would achieve by facing me, allow me to explain what will actually happen. You will fail in your mission, and I will drain you of all your blood. In a few scant hours, you will awaken from death as my devoted servant."
Yeah, I said, rolling my eyes with feigned indifference and shoving my hands in my pockets. "I know all about and then."
"When you awaken," he interrupted, "when you awaken, you will discover yourself imprisoned in my cellar, wrapped in chains of hateful silver."
"Oh?" I said. I removed the silver needle and phone from my pockets, not breaking eye contact with Dracula.
"You will awaken to an overpowering thirst for blood, but I will give you no means for satisfying it. I will leave you in the emptiness, tormented by the pangs of hunger and the bite of silver until your screams echo so stubbornly in your minds that you no longer remember silence. Only then will I consider forgiving you and allowing you to join my service."
"Wow, what did I do to deserve you rolling out the red carpet for me?" I joked. For the first time, Dracula's face flashed with anger.
"You insolent whelp, you took my newest toy from me before I had the chance to even introduce myself properly."
"Your toy?" I echoed, the words seeming to come from far away. "You mean Allison?" Behind my back, I typed away a message on my phone. My thumb hovered over the send button.
"Yes, the woman. She was to be among my finest servants."
Red-hot anger pumped through my veins, so vicious I could barely breathe. "Oh well," I said. "At least you have plenty of other servants, right?" I pressed send on my text message. Something in my voice must have given him pause, because his eyes narrowed.
"What do you mean?"
Just then, there was a flash much brighter even than the lightning, followed by a roar more terrible than the rolling thunder. The ground trembled under the force of some immense blow, and if I didn't already know what was going on, I might have feared the world was ending. The massive branch of a tree, wreathed in flames, came flying through the window, crashing into a row of rotting wooden pews. Wasting no time, Dracula swept over to the broken window, glaring at me as he moved. When he glanced out the window, he saw something that must have startled him. A thin pillar of pure light rising up into the heavens, the top of it not visible. Wherever this pillar met the ground, great plumes of smoke and steam rose, and everything nearby ignited, including the minions of Dracula's who'd been stationed there. The edge of the forest was a confusion of burning figures, shattered trees, and singed body parts, and the chaos only grew as the pillar of light swung in a circle around the castle, slicing, burning, and annihilating whatever it touched.
"My servants!" Dracula gasped. What is this?"
My distraction was working, so it was time. I crept up behind Dracula, the silver needle drawn. There was no way he could possibly hear me over the deafening roar. I pulled my needle back and I struck at Dracula's heart. One of the monster's hands twisted backwards and caught the blade. The needle sunk all the way through his palm, but stopped well short of his heart. The flesh of his hand sizzled, but for a moment he didn't react at all, just went on staring out the window. And then he turned, and his red eyes expressed hatred unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I'm sure the only place I could have found hatred to rival it would have been in a mirror. Well, there went Plan A. Things were about to get hairy.
"What have you done, mortal?"
he roared. He jerked his hand away and thrust the needle aside. "Just giving your servants a little taste of sun," I joked, stepping backward. "It's not healthy to only go out at night, you know." He opened his eyes wide, and I felt a strange lightheadedness closing in on me. I realized what was happening a split second too late.
"Drop down, down, down into my power,"
he intoned, and it was like I was falling into his eyes, the world around me fading.
"Your will is gone. You will obey me now."
I opened my mouth to declare my fealty, but I stopped myself. I knew that if I failed to fight back against any one of his commands with every fiber of my being, I would lose myself entirely. And yet, there was a part of me that yearned to surrender, to let my grief be scrubbed away, and my resolve crumbled. I could feel my body swaying from side to side, my jaw going slack. "I will obey."
"Now, my servant, you will tell me what it is that you have done."
"I called in a few favors, master," I monotoned. "Some friends owed me after I saved their lives in the Parisian catacombs, so they offered me use of their orbital satellite laser."
What?
"Their what?" he repeated, astonished, but didn't give me time to answer.
"What else? Are there any other friends, any other weapons that they will bring to bear against me?"
I smiled dreamily, quite proud of myself. "Yes, there are others." There was an ear-splitting crash as a nearby wall exploded inward. Dracula turned in time to see a colossal metal hand reaching out to grab him.
"What in Lucifer's name is—"
The hand that emerged from the wall snatched him up and lifted him into the air. Before he could even attempt to struggle, the arm jerked upwards, smashing through the roof of the chapel. Ceiling stones toppled onto the floor and shattered to pieces all around me. I just stood there in a half-entranced daze, vaguely aware of the terrible danger I was in, but unable to run for cover. A stone collided with the precarious figure of Jesus, and the statue toppled forward, straight toward me. "Get thee down, fool," cried a voice. A powerful hand pushed me down on my knees, and there was the sound of stone shattering just above my head. Shards of the statue rained down around me. Still dazed, I looked up and saw her. A tall woman, clad in aquamarine plate armor and holding aloft a shield of that same color to protect me from the falling debris. I might have thought from the hue that this was some childish costume, but I already knew from experience that her armor was made from high adamantium, the hardest material in the known multiverse. "Lady Genvert," I gasped. "I thought you were busy with affairs in your own realm." She smirked down at me, lowering her shield. "Thou thinkest me such a lowly worm as to abandon a friend in his hour of greatest need. Pray, do not insult me so in thy thoughts." She extended a gauntleted hand, and I accepted it. She pulled me up onto my feet as though my weight were nothing to her. "Thank you, Lady Genvert," I stammered. "Buffoon, how often need I remind thee? We who have faced down the armies of Zalmuth the Undying have no need for even the meanest contrivances of courtly manner." I shook the cobwebs from my head. Sorry. Thanks, Marivia. Good, she replied. Now bend thy head. I ducked, and she drew a fearsome longsword, slashing above my head in the same graceful motion. I heard gurgles, and 3 of Dracula's minions who'd been creeping up on me dropped to the floor, heads rolling from their shoulders. More were advancing on us from every direction, though, glaring with hateful eyes. Rain poured down on us in great sheets. When this is done, let us toast our victory in the feasting halls of the frozen fortress. Our revels will be as much the subject of song and story as our deeds. I'll look forward to it, I said, putting my back to hers. She passed me a short sword without either of us saying a word. Dracula's minions threw themselves upon us, but they didn't stand a chance. Lady Marivia Ganvert moved with the skill I expected of the girl who'd taken leadership of the Knights of Winter at the age of only 15. Each swing of her gleaming blade sliced through multiple attackers, flinging their severed limbs great distances and painting the stone floor with smeary, bloody puddles faster than the rain could wash them away. Now, I couldn't hope to match her deadly efficiency. Like I said, I'm just not a natural fighter, but I held my own. I ducked and spun to avoid their strikes and turned my dodges into strikes of my own. Heads rolled from shoulders and legs were cut off at the knees, and soon my face was covered in the blood of the enemy. Overhead, through the massive hole in the roof, I caught glimpses of another battle. Dracula was soaring through the air, dodging swipes from Tetsutenshi 45, the mechanical giant that had saved me from the monster's clutches. Every now and then, compartments would open up in Tetsutenshi's chest and great waves of missiles would launch, all converging on Dracula. The monster did his best to dodge these, but inevitably, he couldn't avoid the blasts entirely. His body ping-ponged through the air with each explosion that caught him, and I could practically hear the pilot, a man named Hideaki Tomino, sneering and throwing insults at Dracula. Hideaki was a nasty piece of work, but just then there weren't many people in the world I'd have rather been fighting alongside. It's working, I cried to Marivia as we swapped places, each of us slicing into an enemy that was about to strike the other. We can beat him. Verily. As though on cue, Tetsutenshi lashed a palm down and swatted Dracula like a mere insect. He shot through the hole in the chapel ceiling and hit the ground hard. He bounced and rolled, cracking the stone floor with each impact, until he crashed through the door to the feasting hall and finally lay still in a dusty heap. Marivia and I advanced on the wounded Dracula. The few minions of his that remained nearby threw themselves at us out of pure desperation, but we cut them down without even bothering to look. Didst thou not say that we required implements of wood or silver, or water blessed by one of your holy men to slay these beasts? Marivia jabbed the sword behind her back, perfectly skewering one of the attackers right through its open mouth. Methinks mine elven steel hath proved more than capable of the task. I shook my head. I don't think they're actually dead. We'll have to go and finish them off properly once Dracula is taken care of. Through the dozens of shattered windows, a battle could be seen raging. I spotted the muscular silhouette of Eddie Jericho, a cryptid hunter with over 200 confirmed kills, as he plowed down the enemy with his trademark chain gun. A little further on, I saw a circle of robed monks I recognized as an Atlantean sect that I'd done a job for just the previous year. They were chanting in Latin, and every bloodsucker that dared to approach them burst spontaneously into flame. A little further on, I saw Zawadi Akinyi, a Kenyan magician and rainmaker of unrivaled skill, walking into a crowd of the monsters with that lazy smile of hers. With each jab of her finger, she called down lightning from the storm above and vaporized dozens of the things. We were nearly upon Dracula, who still couldn't find the strength to stand, when the 2 maidservants stepped in from either side of the door. Their smiles were as polite and accommodating as ever, but now they each wielded a gleaming fencing saber. Esteemed guests, if you would let Lord Dracula be. He is rather fatigued at the moment, you see. They curtsied in perfect unison, then raised their thin blades and darted towards us with startling speed. The points of their blades twisted and danced as they approached, and in the split second before they struck, I realized I wasn't going to be able to parry. I was about to die. Just then, a blue-skinned figure in a golden, gem-encrusted spacesuit decloaked beside us. The face of his helmet slid upward, and he fired beams of yellow light from his eyes, enveloping the 2 maids. They let out a little cry of surprise, and that was all the time they had before they rapidly de-aged into children, then infants, and finally vanished into the emptiness of unbirth. Their sabers clattered to the floor, and their frilly uniforms, now empty, fluttered down beside the blades. "Prince Psilgar!" I cried, feeling a huge smile crossing my face. "You made it!" I heard the extraterrestrial's prince echo telepathically inside my head, full of all its usual warmth.
Of course, my friend. I stand here as a representative of all the people of Mulmir. We are all too eager to repay the debt of kindness you showed in combating the Edvian plague.
I laughed and shook my head, a bit embarrassed. I told you, Your Majesty, simply opening the portal to return me to Earth was payment enough.
Enough of your earthling nonsense,
he replied, but his tone was a little playful.
My people will be in your debt until I say otherwise.
Marivia stepped forward, a mischievous grin across her face, her eyes drinking in every inch of the Mulmirian sovereign. Friend, why dost thou not acquaint me with this well-favored ally of thine, whose azure features do shock me so with their handsome aspect? I confess myself most anxious to learn whatever I may about him. Prince Psilgar flushed a striking orange as I opened my mouth to introduce him. Just then, I felt an arm circle my neck and drag me backwards. Damn. I had allowed Marivia's flirting to distract me at the worst possible instant. Keep away, demanded Count Dracula, one clawed hand pressed against my throat. If you do not wish to see this man die, you will lower your weapons. Dracula dragged me backward, away from the battle and into the feasting hall. His eyes darted to and fro, trying to keep both enemies in his sight at once. Friend, called Marivia, visibly crestfallen, I beg thy pardon. The fault for this adversity is mine.
No, the fault is mine. I had a better view of the enemy, but I failed to notice.
Dracula pulled me along the length of the feasting hall, shouting threats to my friends so that they didn't dare follow. He swung open a door on the opposite wall and dragged me up a stone spiral staircase. Moving through Dracula's castle seems like only a blur to me now. We passed through countless stone hallways, climbed countless stone steps, and cut through countless musty chambers. Outside, I could hear the battle raging, but as we drew more distant, those noises were drowned out by the roar of the rain on the roof. For not the first time that evening, I'd resigned myself to death. It felt like I was getting better at it with practice. So, I said, what's the plan, Vlad? Cower in your highest tower and hope that it's too much trouble for my friends to hunt you down? Do not mock me, mortal, he growled. You have found yourself with the upper hand only on account of your exceptional allies. You yourself have done nothing about which you might boast. I'm not hearing a plan, I said, smirking. Could it be that you don't have one? His claws sunk deep enough into my throat that a few rivulets of blood poured out. Of course I have a plan, fool. I shall cast the strongest spells that I know, and transport this castle of mine into the abyss of hell itself. There your friends shall soon meet friends of my own. My triumph was replaced by a cold fear. My allies were strong, yes, but could they stand against the armies of hell? Who knew how many demons would be waiting down there to slaughter us? Dracula grinned, clearly pleased by my expression. I shall beg of my friends to ensure your survival in the ensuing slaughter. I am sure they will find an appropriately slow torment for you to enjoy in the fiery pit. He swept over to a rotten old door and reached for the handle. The door burst open, and a hooded figure stepped out from the staircase, pointing an energy blaster. What in Satan's? The figure fired, and the hand that Dracula had been holding to my neck exploded right off his wrist, his fingers decorating the carpet. He released me, and I staggered away, putting distance between us. Who? Stammered Dracula, clutching his mangled hand. I do not understand. Who are all these people? Friends, I said. But a monster obsessed with controlling people wouldn't know anything about that. Most mortals do not have friends like these. Rather than waiting for a response, he fled in the opposite direction. I knew I should probably pursue him, but I needed a moment to catch my breath. Gasping for air, I scrutinized the hooded figure. Despite what I'd said to Dracula, I honestly had no idea who this person was. Thank you, I gasped. I owe you my life. The figure nodded slowly, but said nothing. They turned and moved as though to leave. It was then that I saw it, something in the way that the figure moved that was familiar, something impossible to explain, but also impossible to mistake. Allison? The figure froze. Neither of us moved for a while. How did you know? She asked, still facing away from me. I stepped forward, my heart swelling with joy. Allison, you're alive! Oh my God, you're still alive! I reached out for her hand, but she pulled it away from me. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice harsher than I had ever heard it before. She pulled away the hood of her coat, revealing the face of that beautiful woman I had married. But her eyes were sad, incomprehensibly so. "How?" I asked, my mouth dry. "I saw you die. No, I killed you. I killed you with my own 2 hands." "A hypno-hologram," she said, shaking her head. "Just an illusion, babe." "That's impossible," I stammered. I mean, that's 24th century tech, and even if you did somehow get your hands on it, why fake your death?" My skin crawled as a terrible possibility occurred to me, one that shook me to my very core. This was my beloved Allison. I mean, surely she couldn't be. But Allison reached down to her arm and confirmed my worst fears. She swiped at the skin near her elbow in precise patterns, her fingers moving almost faster than my eyes could follow. A moment later, her arm split apart, revealing a tangle of wires, steel, and plastic. With her other hand, she withdrew something that had been slotted inside her cybernetic arm. She brandished a badge. "I'm a Class A self-aware android, designation F3493. I'm an agent with the Time Police." I staggered backwards, my legs almost giving out under the weight of the revelation. "No, that's impossible." "But it's true." "When?" I gasped. "When did they recruit you?" She laughed, but it sounded sad. "You're still the same dumbass I married, aren't you? What part of android didn't clue you in?" "Then the whole time." I pressed my hands to my face. "Since before we got married, since before we even met, our relationship was all part of the Time Police's plan?" "Now you're getting it. See, babe, the Time Police needed someone to keep tabs on you. My assignment was to be that someone. What do you think? Did I do a good job?" "It was all fake?" I stepped forward, not sure if I was more astonished or angry. "All those memories, all that talk of love and having a future together, you never meant any of it?" Allison stepped forward, wrapped her arms around my back, and kissed me. It was a long, slow kiss filled with tremendous passion. I returned it, my heart beating out of my chest, and it felt like if I could just go on kissing her, everything would be all right. She pulled away from me, smirking. "Did that feel fake to you, babe?" she asked. Now go," she cried, pointing in the direction Dracula had fled. "I'm already going to get severely reprimanded for helping you as much as I have. Get out of here before I do something to get my ass thrown in a Plutonian supermax." But I don't know if I can beat Dracula alone," I admitted. "I'm just not strong enough if I don't stop him before he pulls the castle into hell." Once again, she only laughed. "Not strong enough," she repeated. "That's rich coming from you, babe. You're the strongest person I've ever known. If you can simply let go of your fears and embrace that strength deep down inside you, I know you can overcome any obstacle. Now get on with it." I stared at her, dumbfounded, but with another impatient gesture from her intact arm, she got me to scurry off. "Allison," I called over my shoulder. "I love you." "Yeah, I know," she said, waving a little. And then I turned a corner and she was out of sight. I followed the trail of Dracula's blood through winding stone passageways and dusty staircases as it spiraled slowly upward. Thunder rumbled mightily and rain beat against the window panes as I passed them by. Finally, after climbing the nearly collapsed steps of a towering spire and reaching an ornate door with a snake skull for a knob, I knew I'd reached my destination. I could feel it in my bones. Dracula was behind this door. I hesitated. Beyond this portal was a creature who wielded nightmarish powers beyond my wildest imaginations and did so in the service of evil. Despite Allison's encouragement, did I really have the courage to face him? A foe whose very existence threatened to shatter my understanding of reality itself? Well, I didn't really have a choice, did I? I twisted the knob and I pushed my way inside. I found myself in a tiny circular tower that had been outfitted as some sort of study, the rotten tables and shelves strewn with hefty leather-bound tomes. I was just in time to see Dracula withdraw one of those tomes from a shelf with his uninjured hand and turn to grin at me. "Ah, you are just in time," he said. "That is good." I lunged for him, but he was too quick, darting back, throwing open the window and gliding out into the open air. He held the book aloft, and it began to glow a sickening crimson.
His twisted laughter echoed across the rain-stricken towers and parapets of his castle. "O King of Hell, O fallen star, O Lord Lucifer, hear my pleas and come to my aid." He snapped the book shut, and the glowing turned even brighter. I was too late. A luminescent circle inscribed with runes and alchemical diagrams materialized in the sky overhead, spinning and expanding with each passing second. In defiance of conventional physics, the circle was like a window into the abyss of hell. I saw strange obsidian citadels and lakes of molten lava filled with billions of the tormented dead. As it grew larger and larger, threatening to consume the whole of the sky, a mammoth clawed hand wrapped around the entrance from the other side. "Oh, you are too kind, Lord Lucifer." Dracula threw up his arms and laughed with complete abandon. "Rejoice, mortal. You shall have the honor of perishing in the claws of the great Satan himself." Another titanic hand reached out of the portal and gripped the side. The two hands pulled and a terrible face emerged. Its teeth were bared into a grin of limitless malice, its eyes burning like mighty embers with the power to set the whole earth alight. Somehow I felt those eyes on me, boring into me. It saw me. It was coming for me. I was so afraid. Satan's laughter shook the whole castle, and he began to reach down through the portal, straight toward me. I shut my eyes and tried to calm my breathing. Could I really do this? Could I really fight this thing?
If you can simply let go of your fears and embrace that strength deep down inside you, I know you can overcome any obstacle.
Allison's words echoed inside me. Time agent or not, I still loved her, and I could sense that she loved me too. I wanted to trust in that bond of love. I wanted to entrust everything to the strength that she saw inside me. I opened my eyes, and I found that Satan's claws were nearly upon me, his gargantuan muscles lit by the flashes of lightning. I wouldn't be afraid anymore. In one swift motion, I pulled the eye patch from my left eye and let it blow away in the furious storm winds. Instantly, I felt the power flowing into me, as fierce and as intoxicating as the day it had been sealed away. I could practically feel my heart sprouting wings as the energy spun and swirled inside it. I heard the voice of my mother as she held me tight on a day so many years ago.
"Listen, baby, you've got to promise me that you'll never take off this eye patch, no matter what happens. Your powers are too dangerous. Mama doesn't want you to get hurt again. Can you promise that for me?" "I promise."
"I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered, "but that's not a promise I can keep." Pure power radiating from every pore of my body, I levitated up off the floor and out the window into the storm. Dracula turned, saw me, and his expression became baffled. "What are you?" he stammered. "Lord of Hell," I cried, "you aren't welcome here." My body exploded with an aura of purple energy, and I flung an arm toward the Titan leering down from the hole in the sky. My left eye pulsed with a strange power. For a moment, Satan's expression changed from one of glee to one of pure astonishment. And then his head exploded. Gore rained down over us almost as thick as the rain. Patches of scarred, leathery skin fluttered in the winds overhead. Bits of skull rattled against the tower roofs like macabre hail. Satan's headless body slumped over instantly, his hand swinging away from me and dragging across the forest beyond the castle, uprooting trees. His body slowly tipped forward. For a moment, it threatened to fall through entirely, the impact of which would have surely endangered the lives of my friends. Fortunately, with another flick of my wrist and a flash of purple energy, Satan's corpse became suspended in the air, halfway through the hell portal, its limp arms still swinging gently. "What?" said Dracula. His gaze was bleary, confused. "I don't understand. I just don't... What?" "You'll never understand, Dracula." With a pulse of telekinetic energy, I sent him crashing into a nearby tower, which toppled over, the old stones raining down on the lower roofs of the castle. Before he could recover, I twisted my wrist and shot him into the next tower over. Lit by the lightning flashes, I took my revenge on this monster who'd hurt so many innocent people,
would have happily killed Allison if she hadn't been able to fake her death. I sent his body careening into roofs, through windows and stone walls. I smashed him into every available surface, and it wasn't for quite some time that I was satisfied and allowed his limp body to drop. He broke through one of the lower roofs, and I sped down after him. I passed through the hole he had made and slowed my descent in time to gracefully touch down in what turned out to be the entrance hall. Dracula lay in a stunned heap in the middle of the floor, his eyes closed. As I approached him, I held up one hand and focused. A moment later, the atoms in the air around me twisted and morphed, assembling themselves into a simple wooden stake that fell into my waiting hand. "Dracula, I have one thing left to ask you," I began. His eyes flashed open, widening terribly, and I felt the familiar dizziness close over me. "Look into my eyes," he commanded. "You are in my—" His eyes exploded, leaving him shrieking and writhing in pain. "I have to know," I continued. "These horrifying abilities of yours, what are they? What are you?" I knelt down beside him, stake at the ready. "The way you control people, the way you change people, it's like something out of a feverish nightmare." I raised the stake above my head. "What manner of creature are you, Dracula? Just give me a name." He stammered. "The what?" I demanded. "The what?" And his expression turned so sad somehow. He swallowed, and then he told me what he really was. When he was done explaining, I knelt beside him for a long while. My hands were shaking, my mind twisting under the weight of his revelation. Rain poured down on us from the hole in the ceiling like tears from the Almighty himself. And then I swung the stake down, right through his heart, and he disintegrated into dust. My life has been a mess for the past few days. Dracula is dead, along with Satan, but there's plenty of stuff left to clean up. The hell portal closed by itself, thank God. But I had to teleport the half of Satan's body that landed on our side into the sun, and the mental strain gave me the mother of all migraines. Those few followers of Dracula's who survived the battle fled into the woods and back to their homes, and they had to be tracked down out of fear that they would spread their condition if left unchecked. Prince Pilger has offered to bring them back to Mulmir and set his finest medical minds to reversing Dracula's curse. And although I know the effort is entirely pointless, I couldn't bring myself to say this to him, because it would mean having to explain how I knew. It would mean explaining what Dracula and his minions really are. Why did I have to ask him in the brief time before I slew him? Why didn't I just drive the stake through his heart and relegate the memory of Dracula to the past? He could have been just another unnamed monster that I had fought and destroyed. Instead, he's the beast whose cruel memory will haunt me to my dying day. Allison vanished, by the way. I'm sure she's long since returned to Time Police HQ to be disciplined for her insubordination. I'm terrified that they will wipe all memories of me from her databanks as punishment. I don't think I can bear the thought of Allison looking into my eyes and failing to recognize me. Still, even this fear is dwarfed by the weight of responsibility that my terrible knowledge has laid upon me. As dreadful as it is, I think I will tell you. It's not fair for you to be walking through life so blissfully, perilously unaware of the danger all around you. Even if it hurts you to hear it, I need to open your eyes. You see, as I raised the stake over my head and demanded Dracula tell me what he really was, he swallowed and spoke. "One of you." "One of us?" I repeated, not understanding. "What do you mean, one of us?" "A human being," he groaned. "That's all I am. Just one of you. Just an ordinary man." And then I brought the stake down on his heart. Still kneeling there in the rain, I wanted to reject what he'd said, but I knew in some deep part of myself that he was telling the truth. I knew that this was the very answer Van Helsing had been trying to speak and then write before death took him. Like he had said, Dracula really was the vilest, cruelest, most terrible creature that can be found on this earth. Not a troll or ghoul, not a ghost or demon, but simply another unremarkable human being. I don't know how I'm supposed to go on from here. My friends have scattered to the wind, and I'm so lonely it hurts, and yet the thought of other human beings terrifies me. As a paranormal investigator, I've had a blind spot my entire life, and it protected me from the pain of this truth. When confronted with Dracula's breathtaking evil, my imagination flew immediately to creatures beyond human understanding, and I failed to see the all-too-human truth right in front of my eyes. Dracula was no monster, at least not in the conventional sense of the word. He was no more and no less than just another human being, corrupted by all the same evils as so many other humans through history. Hunger, arrogance, and most of all, the overpowering greed to dominate other people. The ramifications of this have haunted my nightmares ever since I learned the truth. Every person that you see walking down the street, every passerby, or friend, or family member, every last innocent soul possesses the potential to embody truly inconceivable evil, just as Vladimir Dracula did. So, keep watch on those around you with the utmost care, even the people you love most. Perhaps especially the people you love most. Because in our deepest hearts, we are all Count Dracula.